Welcome to Section 5. Section 5 addresses 4 topics related to selling value. Lecture 8 explores some fundamental principles for selling value. Lectures 9 and 10 focus on best practices for asking questions and active listening. The final lecture focuses on how you can more effectively communicate the value of your solution. Let's now turn to the middle 2 stages of the sales call. Investigating and proposing. They take up 85 to 90% of the interaction time with the customer. They form the value circle, where one is continuously seeking information from the customer about their situation, interest, and challenges, and positioning your solution. Let's set the stage for the discussion of the value circle by exploring 3 overarching best practices for improving your skill for selling value in a complex sale. Number 1, know as much about the customer's successes as you do about their problems. A great deal of time is spent on discussing how to uncover and develop customer problems. This, of course, makes great sense. But there is another chapter to the story. If you are going to be better than your competition, it is also necessary to understand the customer's successes. What are they doing when they're doing something great? What are the pieces of the puzzle that contribute to their successes? And how can their successes be leveraged? If you understand the success story as well as the problems, you can position a solution that separates you from those who know only half the tale. Number 2, know as much about the future as you do the past. Over the years, we've had the opportunity to do a lot of ride-alongs with salespeople. One of our observations is the majority of the sales reps spend a majority of the time just asking questions about the status quo, versus also asking questions about where the customer wants to be in the future. A status quo perspective means your solution will look and sound a whole lot like what everybody else is proposing. If differentiation is to be achieved, then a clearer picture of the future needs to be developed. Some questions used by sales reps that develop this perspective are: how will the set of players in your accounts making the key decisions change in the next several years? What will be expected from your customers in the future as a given that is now considered exceptional? Which of your competitive advantages will be most difficult to maintain as the future unfolds? Number 3, put breadth before depth. The first thing noticeable about developing value in a complex sale is a lot of things are going on and a lot of players are involved. One of the consequences is the lack of time to find out everything about everything all at once. When competing in a complex sale, it's important to get a broad information base early in the sales cycle. This provides a base for deciding where to go to get in-depth information and what you should do when you get there. When it comes to selling value in a complex sale, the trap is getting a lot of information about the wrong things from the wrong people. In any company, what matters to an individual differs depending upon their position. Plus, people in the same position in different companies have different views on what constitutes value. Let's review this notion and start exploring the skills for how to sell value by examining the investigating stage of the sales call. Focus on the customer. It's a core principle in successful selling. You can action this principle by following this idea: ask, listen, and then talk. In too many customer interactions, salespeople talk too much, listen too little, and don't ask enough questions. Yet, the research is clear. In successful calls, the customers talk more than the salesperson, and the salesperson asks more questions. Why does ask, listen, then talk work? Several reasons. First, you know what not to talk about, so objections and awkward situations are less likely to occur. Second, you talk about what is of interest to the customer, so you establish you're there to support their business. Third, you leave having created a small piece of value, so a solid foundation is established for future meetings. So, how much time should a salesperson spend talking during sales calls? Great question. Let's start out by noting that every sales call is different. There are times early in the sales cycle where the customer should be doing most of the talking. As the sales process comes to a close and needs are discovered and objections handled, the salesperson should do more talking because they're sharing solutions and proposals. Nevertheless, while the percentages vary and are somewhat notional, interactions with customers usually work better if the customer is talking about 70% of the time and the salesperson is talking 30%. If the percentages look something like that, you will probably avoid the mistake of talking too soon and talking too much. Let's take a closer look at this ask, listen, then talk idea, starting with the notion of asking questions. So, is becoming skilled at asking questions really as big a deal as everyone talks about? The short answer is yes. There are some skills you need to get good at, and there are some you need to master. Asking questions is one of the latter. Research studies are very clear about this point. In the successful calls, the seller asks more questions than in the unsuccessful calls. And the buyers talk more than the sellers. You have now completed Lecture 8. Lecture 9 explores best practices for asking questions.